All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Carvel Community Meeting. Today is March 29th, 2021. Just a reminder to please read and abide by our code of conduct when attending these meetings. They are being recorded and uploaded to our Carvel YouTube playlist. You can find the code of conduct here in the agenda, as well as the YouTube playlist link here. Today, we're going to have John Ryan kicking things off with going over the agenda. So without further ado, I will let him share his screen.
Cool, let me do that. Thank you, Nancy. Can everybody see the agenda? Cool, great. All right, hey everybody. Welcome to the last meeting of March for us, the 29th. So here we go. One announcement, we still have an open rec for staff engineer. If you know of anybody who'd be interested in the kind of work that we do here, definitely send them our way. Doesn't have to be super formal, but reaching out to Aaron would be the most direct route, Aaron Hurley. So yeah, you can follow that link to check out the rec. Next up, status updates. So we're continuing on with our work that we're doing in YTT on the schemas work. Like last week, we're making progress on getting this feature working inside your libraries that are like dependencies of your libraries. We're continuing there. It seems like we're getting toward the tail end of image packages' ability to deal with nested bundles, doing recursive operations on nested bundles, which is great. It's looking good. Still working on our package manager API, the MVP for that. We're moving along. Still got some runway left there. And then some overall just enhancements for kapp-controller. Does anybody have any more color they'd like to add to any of those items?
I think I remember something about image package, but it wasn't really related to recursive bundles. It was related to the upstream contribution that we made to GGCR, and that got accepted. And so that's some news around image package, some happy news.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
be incorporating that upstream contribution into our image package, and it'll allow us to delete a lot of code that we use to implement that feature.
That's a great call out, Garrett. Yeah, definitely, which is really awesome. So we evolved a little bit how you handle non-distributed layers. Cool. Great call out. Anyone else?
Just a minor note, this hasn't been released yet in kapp-controller, but I believe this came over originally from a YTT issue about basically including file marks basically as an option for YTT templating as part of basically deploying apps. So that's been added to kapp-controller and will be available in the next release. And thanks, John, for bringing that over in an issue to us.
Cool. So now kapp-controller will soon be supporting file marks. Great. That's great stuff. Anything else in terms of updates or announcements there about? That's good. Cool. Oh yeah, and I should have noted ahead of time, hey, if there's anything that you wanted to talk about, this is a great form to do it. Go ahead and get into this document, and let me share this link, and then you just edit it. If I can find the chat. Oh, is it already there? It's already there. Thank you, Nancy. Go ahead and just edit right in there and put your topic, and we'll talk about that. Cool. All right. So seeing none there right this second. Let's go ahead and jump in real quick to check out our plan for this week. So in terms of our backlog here, let me make this a little bit bigger. What we like to do is drive down by our epics, see how each of these larger initiatives are going. So let's take a look at an image package or recursive bundles. we see that we're right at the point where when you're doing an image package pull, that the image log files for all the nested bundles are updated as well. That's in review. Up next is actually going in and documenting this whole feature, which would be a precursor to removing the experimental flag at all. And then an older issue about supporting copying bundles that are referenced by other bundles within an image lock. So let's go ahead and take a look at this documentation story. Shuao, I know it's been a minute and a few things have happened in your life since then. Do you think you can talk us through the story?
Generally, I think I can. So how the way this feature was built till this point was that you first were able to create recursive bundles, like a bundle that has nested bundles on it. Then afterwards, you were able to pull that from the registry, and then after that, you were able to copy it from place A to place B, being it a tar or a registry. And all of this work was done behind the flag that was called minus, I don't remember, flag? Experimental, there you go. Thank you, John. Experimental recursive bundle. And this story, what it does is ensures that when we land the last story, we can just remove this experimental flag and allow everybody to use this by default. So this story is exactly that story that removes the flag. And it is basically the acceptance criteria are just like, does this all still work? The extra thing that we want to make sure is that when we remove this flag, there's going to be code that will be removed as well, because we had like these two types of behavior if you had the flag or not the flag. And this will also allow us to remove some of the code that was processing with the prior usage that didn't have the flag, the prior behavior. So basically that's what the story entails. It is like as a very like small acceptance criteria just to make sure everything is still sane, but that's basically it.
Any clarifying questions before we throw some points? Okay, let me know you're ready to throw a point by giving a thumbs up. No pressure, take your time. Cool. All right, 3, 2, 1, throw. Got, I threw, okay, 3 1s and a 2. I threw a 2 because I thought that there probably would be things we discover in pulling out the code. Just kind of assume that'd be some of the complexity. Anybody want to talk about what they were thinking about throwing a 1? What sorts of things were you seeing?
I feel like Dennis has been on a lot of these stories for the last couple of weeks. And for him who has been building up all this context, if he were to work on this story, I feel like that would be a pretty accomplishable thing for 1 point. For someone rolling on and like trying to catch up on all this context, I think it would be a larger story. And then I didn't really factor in refactors of the code into my complexity estimate. I'm not sure if that was something you included, John.
Yeah, I was just sort of thinking there was general cleanup, but
Mm-hmm.
can make an argument either way. Anything else that anyone else saw? that hasn't been mentioned. Okay, well, rough consensus was 1, so we'll throw 1 on there. Cool. All right. And then, Joao, do you remember whether or not this story is part and parcel to this epic, or is this a writer?
I have a question regarding documentation before we go on the next one.
Yeah, yeah,
Not the
yeah.
removal, but that one. Do
This
we
one?
have, plans from the packaging team to also kind of refer back to recursive bundle from kapp-controller side? Like I know in the alpha packaging API, it says currently we only support OCI image. Would love to have this information also surfaced up that they can use bundles of bundles.
Yeah, we do
Yeah.
have something in our backlog to actually both document this for kapp-controller and also basically iterate on the work here.
Cool. And definitely, I guess a lot of the information you can repurpose from what we have, or you can just link it to ours. Gotcha.
Yeah, maybe you want to grab that story number, and then you could see that get completed. That could be a signal whether or not it's playable. It's 88. Crazy, 88. Cool. Good call out, Helen. Now, Joao, you were about to talk about.
There's nothing in that story. That story is I don't think we need it. That story is just like the initial placeholder for the feature that then grew up into the proposal and so on.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes what happens is the idea comes up in an issue, and then we wrap that in an epic along with the story work. And so you're saying, well, that's the one that's the issue that we get close. Okay, cool. All right. So we don't necessarily need to point this. Great. Okay, cool. That's
And I
image
think
package.
roughly after all of these, we're going to cut a release for image package.
Very exciting. Very exciting. Cool. All right. Down the next epic in our list here, which is schemas for YTT. So currently, as we were talking about at the top of the meeting, we're doing private library support for data values. Next up is supporting floating types. And then this next one is schemas can be overlaid. So let's take a look at this. So to date, we're only using the first schema file that you give YTT. We're ignoring the rest. And so this story, high level, is about, well, I can actually, as a configuration consumer, provide my own schema, which augments, which adds. Maybe I want to add more templating that requires more variables, if you will, more data values. And so I do that by providing my own schema. All right, and so there are these different areas in where that would happen: in the root library schema, in a library targeted schema, and done so declaratively, and done so programmatically. We'll get to that note in a second. So that's the flyover. So in terms of the root library, this is what it would look like. So a library that includes its own schema, and then the ability to actually, for the configuration consumer, to include their own schema. Here's a second schema file. And then when I ask for the data values, I actually see both of them with their defaults. All right. And this is a similar kind of thing, but now this is about, well, if I have a private library that has a schema, so we'll go through these one at a time. So here's that library. Its name is Libby. It has just a schema and a template. And then at the root library, there's a root template in another file called more schema. So within Libby, here is the template where it just says, hey, print out the data values that I have. So that's what that library is going to do. And then its schema defines foobar It sets it to an integer, and the default value is 3. That's inside the library. And then back out to the root, here we have is the schema definition, more schema, and it's targeting Libby declaratively. And here it's saying, I want to add another key called re to foo, and it's going to be a string, default value of empty string. And then the template at the root loads up the library, sets a value from the root, which is typically what you might do if you're providing additional schema, to set your own value. Evaluate all that, and then place that in the, replace the document with that. And when you run this, we're expecting to see that the data values from Libby includes the value set with the schema that was given, and that the root doesn't have any data values, that it's empty. It didn't inadvertently inherit those data values. So far, so good. Cool. All right, and then here's the same kind of concept, except instead of putting that schema as a declared using the libref, we're actually going to do it with this function with schema. So it's a new, so just like we have with data values, we're going to actually have a function called with schema. And whatever it is that you pass in there is going to assume to be a schema definition. And so here in this example, we've just translated what we had that was in a file in the previous example is now captured as a function, as a YAML fragment as a function. So we get the library, we set the schema, we set some data values just like we did in the example up above. We evaluate that, replace it, and we are expecting the exact same kind of output. It's just through this machinery. Cool. Okay, so that's the overall functionality. Now, there's a bit that might be niggling in the back of some folks' minds of, well, wait a second, if you can overlay schema, then doesn't that mean you could actually change existing schema? And isn't schema a contract between what the author says that the templates are expecting? Like that's the point of it, is to articulate that ahead of time so that we can catch those errors before we start evaluating templates. And that's true. And so what we're saying, in order to keep this work focused, we're going to defer trying to find a way of preventing the user from, or at least warning the user from, inadvertently breaking that contract. There's actually a proposal to address this. So even the approach is something that we're exploring. So anyway, so in your mind, if there's a part of that that's kind of bugging you, just know that that's something we're going to provide a better experience where you won't accidentally break something. But in the meantime, without this story, you wouldn't have the ability as a configuration consumer to include your own templates, and that's just not going to fly. So we need to have this. Any clarifying questions about this?
Does with schema already exist?
No.
Awesome. When I read that, I read it as, please use this schema as the schema to check the values against. And that's not the case, right? Like we are using that schema plus the one that is there before. So I'm not sure the naming is very accurate, at least the way I read it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Be something to consider to make sure that whatever we might do to make that readable, that the meaning of with data values is to include it as an overlay on existing data values. So So there's this tension between an existing API that has that convention and introducing an API that might have a different name but the same, or a different naming convention but different semantic, or the same semantic. But yeah.
Like another more like high level question is, why would you want to change the schema from a library?
Yeah, in the bigger picture, maybe you want to be able to add a validation that more tightly constrains a value, for example. Think of like, well, it accepts a port number, but maybe there's something you'd like to have so that it narrows it to a smaller set of ports, for example. Maybe to, well, you can change the default value with your own data values. Yeah, because you're not going to be able to contribute templates to a private library, right? Yeah. I think there's there's little bits here and there, like I just described, little other use cases like that. And then in general, we've found it really valuable to be able to have a programmatic interface that's really close. It's like feature parity with the command line interface. So in addition to that, there are actual use cases that drive this out. It's helpful to have a very similar API programmatically. But yeah, I mean, it has to be justified, which I think it is. Like you can, there are reasons why you might want to further constrain a schema.
Yeah, but like that will bring us to like the next part, right? Because the preventing overlays from breaking schema contract, that where it kind of feels strange for you. Like if the idea is to have validations, I do understand that, but allowing you to restrict even more a value or change a possibilities like set of values that the variable can have, I don't think that's like a good thing. So personally, I would not implement this until we have validations, because it feels like that's the most valuable premise, at least for libraries. I don't know if we can use this as something that's not a library.
Mm, mm.
One
Okay.
situation I could see this being useful for is if you're using a library that doesn't have a schema at all, but yet you want it to have a schema. This is one way you could add that.
Hmm.
So regardless of like validations, I think it could still be valuable.
That's a cool use case. Hadn't thought of that. Good call out. All right. Any other clarifying questions before we throw some points? All right. Whenever you're ready. On signal. I see Joelle still thinking. Cool. All right. Ready? 3, 2, 1, shoot. Okay, a couple of 2s and a 3. And we want to talk about what they see in complexity wise.
So the way that I'm thinking about it is there's sort of two parts to the story. One is supporting multiple schemas in the root library or in a private library. And then the second part is supporting that with schema function for a library. To me, those seem to be sort of separate. And I think that part of the implementation will also be separate. So I see this as like sort of two things to tackle. Might add some complexity.
Cool. Anybody else have other observations? All right, let's check points one more time. So throw again. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Cool. All right. Rough consensus is 3. Great. All right. Probably enough roadway there for this week. All right, and then we do have on the cap track, we have a explore story looking into what does it take to incorporate resources that are applied by some other machinery, not by the pile of manifests that you give cap, but something else is going to create it. So there's that explore. We did talk about that before, so we'll skip over that. As Garrett was pointing out at the top of the meeting, we're almost done with using that upstream contribution got published, and we're incorporating that into image package itself, which is fantastic. Good work, team. And let's see, do we have stuff in here? No. And then we cover this stuff here. Is this a good time to go over these stories?
We haven't touched on them, but if we just want like a brief overview of like what's going on with kapp-controller, a lot of the work that we will be kind of focusing on moving into this week is basically supporting trying to improve the experience of debugging app CRs that are created by kapp-controller. That's been a huge point of feedback for us as far as making it easier for folks to navigate like when things go wrong and ultimately resolve whatever errors they're hitting. So that's, we're basically starting a lot of work on that this coming week. And then Eli, I don't know if you had anything else to include.
Yeah, also just like implementing an aggregation API server. So package APIs will have some custom behavior that's not available through the regular CRD code paths. So we are throwing together like an aggregated API server to help support things like searching for specific packages, like various listing improvements and stuff like that. So hopefully efficiency as well. So continuing on some of that work as well.
Cool. That sounds exciting. Really leveling up your cluster, more capabilities. Great. Thanks for that. Let's pause a second. I want to take a look back and see. We've got no triage topics here. There are a couple items to discuss. I think that's good enough for runway for the backlog for this week. Okay. So let's dig into these. Let's see. This one is CAP 201, which is about app group deploys. Let's take a look at this issue together.
I can provide some detail here. So CAP has a command app group, which when you run CAP app group deploy from a directory, it uses the current directory's subfolder structure to deploy multiple apps at once. So, so say in the current directory, you have 3 subdirectories. Each one of those directories have some configuration in them that you want to deploy to your cluster. Kapp will deploy each directory as a separate app using the directory name as the app name. So this is really helpful for like GitOps workflows. You want to just deploy multiple things. So this issue specifically is about using the -f parameter with kapp app group deploy in order to include some global kapp configuration along with your deployed apps. So like with kapp, you can include a kapp configuration file that specifies certain configurable features with kapp, like rebase rules or like ownership label rules that like allow you to customize kapp deployment more. So currently kapp app group deploy doesn't support including a kapp config file that will be applied to all of the apps in each directory that you have with this command. Instead, you need to include a kapp config per subdirectory if you want it to be included in the deployment. So this would be, yeah, basically to add the ability to add like a global configuration for all of your apps that will be deployed by this command.
Weren't there talks in the past about deprecating this command in kapp? I think I remember something on these areas.
Yeah, there was a enhancement filed in YTT for a similar command, basically to template multiple groups of configuration based on directory structure and then output them to specific directory. We decided not to move forward with that issue. I think we've talked about it in a previous community meeting actually, but we didn't make any decisions on whether we want to stop supporting this feature in kapp. I think the distinction there was like, for YTT, it doesn't make sense because YTT is usually piped into other tools. However, kapp is sort of the end of the line. So it is the last tool that you'll use before deploying configuration to your cluster. So providing this functionality is sort of a different use case.
Yeah, and I think there's I think you might even mentioned it, Carrie, at the time that there's like a question of, well, are people using this? I think Dimitri might have represented it as a kind of experiment or just something he's poking at, like, hey, maybe this might be a thing. And the question is whether or not folks are picking it up. So here's a data point where that is happening.
I think that is a good consideration though as well. Like, do we want to continue adding features to app group if it's something that we would consider maybe, not supporting in the future?
Yeah, what would this this person's solution look like if they didn't have app group deploy?
I guess it would be multiple kapp deploy commands, each command specifying a kapp config.
And if they had like common configuration, that might be sitting in like a a sister directory, like there's a list of all these apps that represented each directory, it would loop over those, but then there would be like a global or something like this.
Yeah, that'd be one way to automate this feature. So I'm not really sure whether we're at a point right here to decide whether we want to deprecate this feature or not. I think we need more information, and probably like this issue is maybe not the right one to have that specific conversation around. But I think it is a good data point of like, do we want to keep adding features to this? And so this person suggested adding a -f flag in order to add a kapp-config. I think there are also like alternative ways that we could potentially do this if we do want to like support deploying global config. Like one being use a similar like directory structure contract that we're using for this flag or for this command currently. Like rather than sometimes allow using the -f flags for certain kinds of files, maybe we could allow kapp-config in like the top level directory, and that would apply to all of the subdirectories. Could be an alternative for this.
Yeah, interesting. Any other thoughts about this? It sounds like it's something that it's good to bring up here in front of the group to sort of plant the seed, something we need to chew on, whether or not we double down on this feature, or if perhaps someone trying to use this for really reals is running into edges. Does that mean that maybe we want to pull back or lean forward into it? Yeah, it's just a core part of what kapp does.
Given how much this feature is documented on our site, it feels more like an experimental feature, something that you would learn more about just by looking through the help pages on the CLI. And with this person's scenario, it feels like there's multiple workarounds. So my feeling from this issue was that we should be like leaning away from this feature in kapp. Although I do like Carrie's idea of including like in the top level directory of a app group command, you could have just like a config file that would apply to every single directory that you're deploying. So
yeah, are there consequences to just straight up supporting the -f flag? Like, what would that do?
Well, it would be a inconsistent experience with the other commands that kapp supports. So you can do kapp deploy -f and then provide some configuration files. And there isn't a limit on what type of files those could be, other than them being like, Kubernetes configuration. So then if we were to allow the -f command, or sorry, the -f flag for this command, I don't think we would want to support arbitrary configuration files, since the current naming scheme is tied to the directory structure of the current directory. Providing additional configuration via -f would be I think, confusing.
Yeah, it's interesting. You were saying that sort of the origin of this was that the GitOps flow, and so that you can have something to deploy that, like, if a directory shows up, it would just sort of automatically be included in the deployment. So it does seem from that perspective a little bit surprising that something would get added to your configuration potentially. Or it could be a feature that, like, if there's something that has to be present, say, to satisfy some kind of OPA rule, some policy, or whatnot, that apps need to have certain RBAC in place or something like that. But even then, wouldn't that be something you'd want to include within your app? I don't know. Yeah.
That is actually really interesting because if you have your configuration stored in a specific directory, I would kind of expect that everything that you need is present. And then so if in order to use CAP, you needed an additional configuration file that wasn't included in your directory, it could be surprising. It's an important consideration, yeah.
Cool. Okay. So it sounds like we got more thinking to do to kind of turn this over and come to some kind of direction forward. Yeah.
I'm happy to like summarize what we talked about today in this issue.
You're raising your hand to do that, Carrie, is that right?
Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Appreciate that. Awesome. Okay. All right. So no triage help request. All right. This next one is a proposal to rename images when copying bundles. What is this?
So like this is our proposal number 3 for image package. I'm not prepared to talk in length about this right now.
Okay.
It is more a reminder that we have this proposal on, and we would like to have this ironed out by the end of next week. So if you all have some time, just read through it. If this is something that interests you, that you have a use case for this, just look at it, see if it matches your use case, if it works for your workflow. And also at the same time, if you see something that feels strange, just let us know. And yeah, so we'll try to get this ironed out by next week so we can merge this and start preparing the work that will be required in order to have this feature added.
Cool. So it looks like the place to go is, well, we have the link in the community meeting, so you just go straight from there. That takes you to the pull request, and then I just went to the one file and said,
I can give you like a quick TLDR about it.
That'd be great.
It's just like currently image package, when it copies images from one repository to another repository, it copies all the images from the bundle and puts them inside the same repository in the destination. So if you have, like, let's imagine 3 images on a particular bundle, it copies the 3 images inside the same repository with different SHAs that then it knows how to retrieve it. So this is the current behavior of image package. What this proposal is trying to accomplish is allow the person that is using image package, when copying images from one registry to another, to have some power to say, like, where do I want my images to be? Where do I want my images to stay? Instead of being directly inside the one particular repository, they can be spread out. And this proposal, it creates a mechanism for you for image package for the users of image package to tell image package where do you want to move your images to. So that's more or less what this is all about. It is a little bit big. It has introduction of concepts that didn't exist in image package, some configuration files, for example, like the configuration file that's there. And it has some nuances and has some things that are reaching up into the future and some things that are like the MVP in order to move this forward. They are not really delineated here on the proposal, like this separation, but then when we start implementing it and when we convert this into stories that make more sense, we'll try to make sure that the things that are nice to haves will be added in a later period, and the things that are really required for this feature to go forward to be added first. So,
Anything that you want to highlight that's sort of like obviously part of that MVP?
so yeah, I do believe if you scroll a little bit down, to be fair, I think I outlined that now that I remember. So if you keep on scrolling, I think I highlighted the phases that I think we could use.
There's use cases here, is this it, or further down?
Use case, I think it's if you continue going down.
Okay. Oh, here we go. I see
There you
phase
go.
0.
So
Here we
there are
go.
like, I think there are 4
Hmm.
phases, if I'm not mistaken. There's like a pre-phase, phase 0 that just, it's something that needs to happen before we start working on this. So this is like pre-work. Then there's an MVP, a first MVP that will allow you to basically copy the OCI images between registries, choosing the strategy that best suits your needs. There will be like 2 strategies to start with. And it's going to be copy everything into a single repository or maintain original repository that will keep the repository names there. And also on the MVP, when the user copy a bundle and do not select the strategy, it's going to copy to, it's going to maintain the current behavior. So it's going to copy to a single repository. And when you pull the bundle to disk, and you'll see the correct locations of all the OCI images on the destination, right? Because now they can be in multiple places. Currently, when you pull the image log file, finds out where are the images on the current repository. So it will do the same work, but now it has a little bit more work to do in order to find out the images because they can be in multiple places now. So this is like the MVP, like the thing that we really want to accomplish in order to get this out. So the second MVP for this is after we have all this built, we want to be able to just, I want to have like this particular strategy for all the images, but there is this one image that I wanted a little bit different. So this second MVP introduces the concept of an override that will allow you to override the strategy that is defined. And you can override that by using direct matching, like the image repo there, or using the image matcher. So the matchers match the matchers used in kbuild, so that we have an experience that is more or less familiar to people that use one tool. They also know how to use another tool, the matching tools from other tools. And the final phase of this story is introduction of a little bit of more of an advanced tooling where you could have some YTT StarLark functions to do the selections for you. So instead of you saying, oh, I have like this list of overrides, you can just write a little bit of StarLark code there and have YTT to pre-process this for you without you having to define like a list of all the a list of all the images that you want to override. So that's like the thing that is going to be like more in the future, I think. But this is like more or less a proposal of the phases. And if we get to like phase number 1, to MVP number 1, I think we'll get to a place where the majority of our requirements are met from that we got. The MVP 2 allows you to be a little bit more flexible on these requirements. And number 3 is like the end goal of something that we will talk about. Does it make sense for us to do this right now or not? It's not something that is like mandatory in order for this to be working for our requirements.
That was fantastic for not being prepared to talk about it. Well done. Yeah, and it just footnote, I know that we're like looking at the possibility of providing the ability to, wherever you need an expression, potentially using Starlark there. So this is one of many places we're looking at that possibility as well down the road. Well, terrific. Thank you, Joao. Cool. Don't see any more triage help here. Okay, cool. So with that, is there anything that we might have missed that didn't make it onto the agenda here? Anybody have anything?
There was one thing that Helen brought up earlier, and she mentioned that there was a release to be cut for image package potentially, and I was curious about what she meant by that. Is it coming up soon, or is it what does it look like for cutting a release?
Yeah, what I meant by that was if you look at ZenHub, you know how we were filtering by epics there. So as soon as we have all those stories that are in the prioritized backlog are completed, which we don't know what the timeline that would be, that's when we will cut a release once that entire epic is delivered or developed.
Okay, so there's no real estimate. It could be at any point.
It could be any point whenever that is done. All those, 3 stories are completed.
Okay, and just from my experience listening in on recursive bundles and whatnot, it seems to be a pretty big release. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah. Yes.
Like, could it warrant a blog post?
I think so, because it is going to unblock a lot of possibilities. So I think it is might be a very interesting thing to do a blog post on.
Okay, and maybe I'll touch base with Aaron when he's back, just to see, but who would write the blog, unless there's someone on the team that is interested in taking on that task.
I know Joao has lots of free time right now.
So much free time.
It would have to be a joint effort, both the packaging side of kapp-controller side and recursive bundle side, because I think the true power of recursive bundles only comes when it's used with the packaging API.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely lights it up, doesn't it?
Eli or Daniel? So I touch base with Dimitri.
We're happy to work with whoever
Okay.
ends up writing it.
Anything else there? All right, Nancy, do you wanna wrap us up?
Take us on home.
Take us home.
Okay, thanks everyone for joining this week's edition of the Carvel community meeting. There wasn't any particular discussion of topics that we didn't get to today, so we won't be moving anything from this meeting to the office hours, but if there's anything that does come up between now and then, or now and the next Carvel community meeting, which is next Monday, and the office hours is also going to be next, is it Thursday? Yeah, next Thursday. And that office hours occurs every second and fourth Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. And that's an opportunity for you to just come with any questions, anything that you need some more in-depth help on regarding Carvel tool suite. The maintainers will be available during that time to help you with that. And if there's anything that occurs before then, feel free to join us for the Carvel community meeting, which is next Monday at the same time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. And we meet every Monday. So unless there's a holiday, which it would be canceled. So
Actually, sorry to jump in, Nancy. It is a holiday. This Thursday is April Fool's. But actually, like you said, we're doing the office hours fortnightly, so it's actually the following week. So not this Thursday.
Oh, I thought I said next Thursday.
Did you
Oh.
say next Thursday? Then you were absolutely right.
I could have said this Thursday. I don't know. It's Monday.
No.
My brain
Yeah.
is
Don't show up on
scattered.
Thursday. We won't be there. Joke's on you.
Okay, thanks for that, Joanne. And with that, we hope to see you at one of the meetings or the office hours in the future. Thanks.